Well, welcome everyone to our SEL BC virtual retreat. We are very excited to be doing this all together. I would like to start by acknowledging that I am working and learning with you all today on the traditional and unceded territory of the Kwantlen, Katzie, Matsqui, and Semiahmoo First Nation. Very also aware that we're all on different territories today, so also gratitude to the people whose territory all of our participants are on this afternoon as well. My name is Gail Markin, and yeah, I'm happy to have you all here. Just a little bit, not just myself, but our team that has put together this, our larger team of SEL BC, and also the group that's put together this webinar. Just want to start with some invitations and information. Just inviting people to turn their videos on. So one of the things that in this time of these virtual meetings is that what's really lovely is to be able to see people's faces. It of course is just invitation, so you do whatever works for you, but always fun to sort of see each other and familiar and new faces, so that's great. Please leave your audio muted unless you're speaking. If you are, of course, you unmute and that'll work. I just put here, it would be great to see your name, just in case yours has just a, you know, sometimes people come on with just a phone number or something. You can always go into the top right-hand corner where those three little dots are and rename yourself so we can see who you are. Always nice to see people's names. We will be monitoring the chat section for questions all the way through. So most of the questions will probably come at the end, but if you think of something or want to put it in there, for sure, put that into the chat. Just to let everyone know, we will be recording and posting this webinar. So we'll record it today and then post it on our website afterwards. So people who missed out, or if you want to go back and look at something again, it will be there. And then we are going to have a short feedback survey that'll come to you at the end. And we hope you'll take the time to fill it out and give us some feedback.
So, hello everyone, my name is Holly Vivier, and I sit on the retreat planning committee for SEL BC as well as the executive. And just to give you a little bit of background about what SEL BC is, we are a network of educators, research, community organizations, so coming from schools, coming from universities, and we're really committed to the promotion of social emotional learning, social responsibility, and collaborative learning. So, you know, looking at what's current in research and what's happening throughout different districts. And we meet usually about once a month just to connect and to share resources and to really talk about SEL. And at the moment, we are located across the lower mainland of British Columbia. And really what we do is we learn about SEL by connecting practice and research, which is sort of what we're doing today. We really advocate for SEL, and we like to sort of share leadership in SEL with many different fields in BC.
Hi everyone, my name is Connie Easton, and I'm really excited to see everyone here today. And this is a virtual retreat. So last year, we actually had a retreat in person in North Vancouver, an incredible setting. And we're able to spend the day together really exploring the whole process of research to practice. So we were gathered together with researchers. We worked together to look at the Castle Wheel and how SEL would be connected to the research that's happening right now and what that would look like in terms of our classrooms and our schools. So what we're doing today is much the same. We have some wonderful researchers to share some cutting edge work with you, and then we're going to talk about what that's going to look like on the ground in your classrooms and in your schools. And the idea is that we want to inspire you to create your own network for growing social emotional learning in your district and working together with your colleagues across the province. So thank you for being here.
Hi everybody, I'm Marna Macmillan, and I'm really thrilled to be able to be part of this team, SEL BC, And I'm not going to do a formal introduction for Dr. Kim Schonert-Reichl and Dr. Molly Lawlor, because I'm going to let them do it themselves to save time. But I just want to thank both of them for not only presenting today with us, but also being part of our team and really bringing research truly with heart and humanity into the work that we do. They are such a model of bridging this understanding of current research and helping us understand the implications for that in each of our contexts. So thank you both for being here. I'll turn it over to Molly. Is that right?
I actually think Kim was going to start.
Yes,
I think so, yeah.
And
My apologies.
That's okay. We'll figure this out. Let me just, here we go. I'm going to share my screen and then get to and I have to apologize to people because there's construction happening here as well. So you're going to hear some, I guess, jackhammering and things like that. Makes it real, right? So thank you so much for the introduction, Marna. As you said, I'll be able to talk a little bit more about me, but I just have to do such a shout out to SEL BC. I've been a part of SEL BC since it began, when it was even called Circle, the Social Responsible and Collaborative Learning Environments. And I think that that has been a long, I want to say it's been probably 15 years that have been a part of it. And it really, what I love about SEL BC is how important it is to make this bridge, make a bridge between research and practice, and how many researchers work. And in fact, also could not do any of the research that we're doing without the relationships that we have with in the district. So I'm going to be able to share some of that with you. So today's, so I'm so sorry about this noise. So hopefully you can all hear me. But the title is Research to Practice: Understanding Mindfulness-Based Social and Emotional Learning Programs Through an Epigenetic Lens. The presenters, as you heard, is Dr. Molly Lawlor, who is the Director of Curriculum and Research for the MindUP program, and she can tell you a bit more about her. Marna, who you just heard, who is from Coquitlam School District 43, and myself, and I'm a professor at UBC in the Faculty of Education. I've been there almost, well, I guess 29 years right now. And I'm also the director of the Human Early Learning Partnership at UBC. If you've heard of the Early Development Instrument, the Middle Years Development Instrument, part of that. So as you heard, there's an introduction to SEL BC in the session. Molly is going to do an overview of MindUP. Marna then is going to kind of bring us kind of closer into MindUP in School District 43. And then I'm going to bring you on a journey of the MindUP research and what we've been able to accomplish in the past 10 years, and then talk in more detail about one of our studies that is ongoing, which is our MindUP in biology study examining epigenetics. So I'm hoping some of you might be interested in epigenetics. And I will say that one of my team members, the project coordinator and one of my PhD students, Jenna Whitehead, is also going to be here. So hopefully she could join in the question and answer period, and then we'll go to closing. But just in case you didn't know, social and emotional learning is a growing movement. BC is leading the world in its focus on SEL. And I've heard over and over again, there's been no time like the present right now with the pandemic of an importance of SEL. And I've actually heard, I read a great article about how this pandemic could push schools in a positive direction. And the first one was a renewed and increased focus on SEL. And one teacher saying, SEL is not another thing on our plate, it is the plate. And I really think this is true going forward. We made mention of Castle's wheel, the 5 dimensions of competencies of SEL from the Collaborative for Academic, Social, and Emotional Learning located in the US. And they talk about these 5 aspects. But I want to, before we turn it over, just say that so social and emotional learning is not just about a program, although today we are talking about a program. It happens within a context. So for SEL to be effective, you need to have these 3 dimensions in place. You need to have a focus on the SEL of the educators, building their own well-being and social emotional competence, the focus on creating a safe, caring environment, context in the school, in the classroom, and outside. And then you also need to focus on SEL of students. And so now we're going to go in more detail. I'm going to hand it over to Molly, and she's going to talk about social and emotional learning and mindfulness with a focus on the MindUP program. Take it away, Molly.
I'm going to, yeah, I'm going to share my screen, and I'm very excited to be here. I have been kind of involved, you know, really with Kim. So those of you who don't know me, I've actually been working with Kim for many years, probably, oh goodness, 15, 16 years, something like that. I was one of Kim's doctoral students and have been on the journey with her around mindfulness and social emotional learning during that whole period of time. So I'm just going to start my slides here. So my background is really psychology. I did a master's of arts in counseling psychology, and I really discovered that I was very passionate about universal primary prevention and finding ways to give children and adolescents tools that would help mitigate many of the issues that I saw during my clinical training in young adults. And so along the way, I ended up being involved in this project, MindUP, and that was really Kim's invitation. She got a call from Goldie Hawn, who said, hey, I want to start this program, and I want some research on it. So that's really the starting place of this MindUP program. It was a dream of Goldie's when she was living here in Vancouver in the early 2000s to bring science into the classroom, specifically with a focus on neuroscience and mindfulness. And she was really at the cutting edge. You know, this was before a lot of this educational neuroscience had really hit the field. And so I was brought in to help develop, and along the way I've been kind of the lead writer, and also working with Kim around the research and evaluation of the program. So a little bit, some of you might be familiar with MindUP, some of you not. So I'm going to go through a little overview of the curriculum. So it's designed as a universal primary prevention program. So it's designed for all children. It is from preschool all the way through middle school. And there are 4 pillars theoretical pillars that we draw from. The first is neuroscience. Goldie was adamant the brain had to be in there. So neuroscience, mindfulness or mindful awareness practice, positive psychology, which is really the science of happiness and well-being, and of course social and emotional learning, with the goal of really promoting children's joy, resiliency, and also creating more kind and caring citizens for tomorrow. So we've seen this wheel already today, and I just wanted to let you know, so the program was really designed to support all 5 of these CASEL competencies, and MindUP is a CASEL Select program, so it is featured in the CASEL guide that many of you are familiar with. And Kim will tell you about the MindUP research journey that helped us get into that guide. So I mentioned there's 4 versions, and currently the version that many of you have probably seen is the one that was published by Scholastic in 2011. And since that time, a lot of things have happened in the research, and we've learned more things, and we've gathered feedback from educators. So we've been working on kind of a MindUP 2.0 next version. And we began with preschool to coincide with a big research study that's happening in Portland, Oregon, in early learning childhood settings. So we have a new preschool version. And then we have our early elementary, so K through grade 2, late elementary, grades 3 through 5, and then middle school, grades 6 to 8, which is what we'll be focusing on primarily today as part of Kim's research. So one of the things that we really do in the program, and we begin with the brain for kids, and we know that when children learn about their brain, it gives them a sense of control and empowerment, because they understand how, you know, feelings aren't just coming out of nowhere. They're actually happening, they're emerging in the brain, and there are things that we can do to actually regulate and manage our emotions. So it's research in that area has really shown it's been beneficial for kids to learn about their brain, and anecdotally throughout the years, that's been one of the things that have been really key for buy-in, especially from older students around middle school age. Going in and saying, we're going to start with some deep breathing, sometimes wouldn't be the most popular thing with a great group of grade 7s. So starting with the brain really creates this understanding of like, okay, I understand why the breathing would help me calm down the area of the brain that is responsible for stress. So here's a little overview of a very simplified brain, and just the 3 main areas that we teach in the program, namely 2 areas in the limbic system, which are in the center of the brain, the amygdala and the hippocampus, and they're both very involved in the stress response, so our fight or flight response. And then the prefrontal cortex, which is the thinking part of the brain, and that's the upstairs brain that Dr. Dan Siegel calls the upstairs brain, and the limbic area being the downstairs brain. And this is our thinking area where we house a lot of our executive functions, so our ability for cognitive flexibility, attention, working memory, and it is the part of the brain that actually regulates our emotions that arise from the limbic area of the brain. So what we know, about development is this part of the brain is actually not fully developed until mid to late 20s. So when we think about children, they're very much under construction. So of course we think about toddlers and what are they known for, tantrums and such. And so that's because the limbic area is developed first, the emotional center of the brain. So in the program, they learn about the anatomy of the brain and the function of these different parts. And then they learn tools onto how do I regulate when my limbic area is really, when my amygdala is fired up, when I'm feeling fearful or stressed or angry, rather than being reactive. How can we help our students be more reflective? And so this comes from really the mindful awareness practice or the mindfulness piece. And in the program, we use mindful breathing or deep belly breathing. And when we started, this was kind of a new thing, but now, there's a whole mindfulness magazines and it's all over the place, and meditation apps. And so most people are familiar with this idea. I think the key for the MindUP program is that it's a really consistent practice. When we think about physical fitness, we know that, just going for a walk once a month probably isn't enough. We actually need to have regular exercise. And we know the same is true for our brain. Kim, I know you call it social and emotional fitness. Others call it, mental fitness. So it's really about exercising those skills. And it's so important that, we provide those opportunities. And I think in BC, we're really leading the way with integrating it directly into the curriculum so that the time is there to do these things. So for those of you that aren't familiar with the concept of mindfulness, just a brief description. It's really about just being aware of your own mind in any given moment, to pay attention in a particular way in the present and without judgment. So that's a bit of a wordy definition, but it's for children. We really think about helping them to become more aware. And it's that mind-body connection, because a lot of our emotional experience is somatic. So we understand, children who experience anxiety often have stomach aches, or you feel your heart racing, or your palms get sweaty. So beginning to help kids, tune into their own experience is the first part of being able to regulate that experience. And so mindfulness, has been a real buzzword. And I think essentially what we know from the research is that it is linked to well-being. It is linked, when you practice it, you can actually become more mindful, which can be helpful in alleviating things like anxiety or stress, and also fosters attention, which is important in all areas of our life. So another way we do this in MindUP is through mindful senses activities. So using, again, when we think about practicing mindfulness, whether it's through paying attention to your breath, it's just thinking about exercising that brain muscle, exercising that muscle of focus. So how do you, our minds are wandering all the time. So how can you learn to train your mind to actually stay more on focus with where you want it to be? Well, it's like a muscle, you exercise it. So you think about these anchors for attention. So the breath might be one in the brain break. And then the senses are other areas that you can use to actually practice paying attention. And they're always with you. So in the program for elementary and early years, we go through a series of sensory activities that help students to learn, like, oh, I can, use my sight, I can use my listening, I can use my taste as a way to practice mindfulness. And we do this as well in the middle school program. And then moving into kind of the area of the science of well-being, and what we've learned over the last 20 plus years is that happiness is not all fluff. Like, there's a lot of benefits to focusing on nurturing our well-being and happiness. And we know that those people who experience positive emotions are actually more resilient and resourceful, they're more socially connected, and they're more likely to have higher levels of life satisfaction. So with that knowledge in hand, we really wanted to think about how do we infuse the science of positive psychology into the classroom, and with the understanding that positive emotion actually lends itself to learning. So we know when kids are stressed or upset or experience trauma, their learning centers of the brain are not available. So one of the things that we're really focused on in MindUP is opening those channels for learning. And some of the tools that we use are directly from the science of happiness. And many of you have been, this is not new to many of you. I'm sure that previous SEL retreats and meetings have included these things. But things like practicing gratitude, savoring happy moments, and acts of kindness. And I think about the time that we're in right now around COVID-19, and we're all feeling a little discombobulated. We're all feeling more stressed, perhaps, and our students are feeling perhaps disconnected from their peers. There's a sense of uncertainty as to what's going to happen. And so this is a time when we can really draw from these simple actions that can promote more positive emotion and experience in the moment. I think of living where we do in a beautiful province of British Columbia. Even looking outside our windows and noticing the beauty that's around us is a simple act of gratitude. Going out each night at 7 o'clock, like what happens in many of our neighborhoods, and banging pots of pans, it's a sense of connection and also a sense of kindness and rallying on our essential workers through this tumultuous time. And then savoring happy moments. Many of you are locked in your homes with your families, which presents many opportunities and also many challenges, but finding times when we can all slow down and be together and savor a moment, whether it's watching a movie together, or having a meal, or just checking in at the end of the day. I think it's that active exercise of focusing on the positive actually, can rewire the brain to have a more optimistic mindset. So that's another thing we talk about a lot in the program, especially in our teacher training, is we know that you can actually become more optimistic. However, like exercise, like learning math, like reading, it takes practice. So we're very explicit in this kind of communication with our students that these things are skills that need to be practiced, not learned once and left behind, but things that are regularly embedded into our day. And just a little thing about relationships. I wanted to bring this in today because I think that's one of the things that, and Kim can certainly speak to this, is a pressing challenge for us in our new kind of reality of how do we maintain those relationships with each other when we're kind of forced to be separated. And so one of the things that we're working at the foundation is thinking through that and thinking about how we can provide opportunities for children and adults to connect with one another. But I just wanted to give a little research connection here. We know that when people can regulate their emotions, so being able to actually act with more reflection than reaction, we're more ready to have empathy and should we act pro-socially. And in our studies, Kim will speak to, is that we actually found that students were more pro-social, and there was a higher level of peer acceptance following the program in comparison to those children who did not receive MindUP. So a very quick hand wave to the middle school pilot program, so you kind of understand what students experienced in the research study that Kim's going to share next. Is what did it involve? So I kind of went through this a little bit. So again, there was a learning about the brain, those components that I shared, introduction to the mindful awareness practices through sensory experience, and then the brain break. So using that breathing practice regularly, consistently throughout each day, using things like mindful movement. That's another way to practice mindfulness, using your body as an anchor for attention. So we're all attached to Zoom. So I invite you all, whenever you can, to stretch your legs and walk, and take that opportunity to just check in and notice the sensations of your body as you go for a walk around the block. In middle school, we included a few additional things that mapped more onto the developmental experience of middle schoolers. So beginning to talk about self-care, giving kids using that language that, self-care is not an indulgence. It's really a critical piece of our social emotional competency, to be able to understand when we need to take care of ourselves, because that's the first step to take care of others. The other thing we added is a lesson around interconnectedness or interdependence and mindful consumption. So in this time of COVID, we certainly understand how interdependent we all are. And really having students think about consumption more broadly. How do you consume all sorts of things, whether it be technology, social media, whether it be things like fast fashion or junk food, getting them to think really critically about what's coming into their lives and how it may support their well-being or actually be not so helpful. And then kindness and compassion. And our final lesson on all versions is around community action. So providing kids an opportunity to work together to benefit others in their community. So I'm going to end my little piece here with gratitude. I think it's important that we're at a retreat. We should do something retreat-like. So I'm just going to invite you to just take a moment, and as I've already mentioned before, this is a practice, and the more you practice, and if you're regularly attuned to the good things in your life, it becomes an automatic response. So I just invite you to take a moment. This is an invitation. You don't have to do it, but if you choose to, please join me and just bring to mind one thing that you're grateful for today. It could be as simple as a cup of coffee. It could be the sunshine that's outside. It could be somebody that you see here on the screen that you're feeling connected to. And feel free to share in the chat if you would like to. And I'll just share one piece before I go. And I'm just grateful for the team of colleagues that I work with regularly on this, and that I feel so motivated in this challenging time to think of creative new ways that we can reach children and their adults to support their well-being. And with that, I will hand it back over to Kim. I'll just say, if you have questions about MindUP or anything that I've spoken about, you can start writing them in the chat, and we'll be monitoring the chat and answering questions at the very end. Okay, I'm going to stop my share.
It's me back here again. I'm going to share my slides. Thank you, Molly, so much for that, for giving the context of MindUP. It was a program that is so important to mention. It is one of the few SEL programs that was actually born in British Columbia, in Vancouver, and tested throughout the province. There's only a few SEL programs that actually have the roots that are evidence-based, and MindUP being born here and have gone across the world, as you'll hear more from me. But Marna, I'm going to turn it over to you, and you just tell me when I should click the slides.
Thank you. And I love the gratitude coming through on the chat. It's fantastic. So I'm going to be really quick, and in that I'm just going to, first of all, send a shout out to my predecessors that actually opened MindUP to me when I was a teacher in the classroom. I'm still a teacher, but I'm a coordinator right now for curriculum in our district, as well as a focus on middle years SEL. And I came to MindUP through my predecessor that was in this role, Sharon LeClaire, and Maureen Dockendorf, who was heading up learning services at the time and working closely with Kim to do the research around this program. And I was in a middle school with grade 8 students and brought this back. And truly, I can't say enough about what it opened up to me in terms of teaching kids about their brain, and how it allowed kids to almost develop that metacognitive piece, which we know is so powerful in education, around understanding why things happen the way they do and being curious about that. So you know, from that, which was, I don't know, Kim, 2008, maybe 2007, and again, Lisa Pedrini, our colleague who was making it happen in to now, has been really a journey in Coquitlam, and quite lovely. But it was the first time that I actually could hear and see what SEL looked like. It gave me a pathway, what it looked like in all of those castle competencies, what it meant to practice those things and develop them in myself and my students. And as you see here, this is a middle school classroom. You know, middle school kids always love language and kidding around, and the way they remember a Magilla in this classroom is Amy G. Dalla. But they're brainstorming, of course, all the things that they know worry them and stress them, and ignite that or ignite that amygdala. So you can go to the next slide. So knowing that and having that experience, when I moved into this role, and was lucky enough to be able to work with other educators, Kim, Molly, and promote this program. And we know that, as Kim said, the SEL isn't just a program, but what I started to see was this sort of beautiful pathway that people used MindUP to grow SEL in different capacities. And you can see here, of course, the cuties with their brain hats on. Seeing kindergarten children use brain language is remarkable. I had a group of teacher candidates go into a kindergarten classroom and listen to their conversation about the brain, and they couldn't believe it. They couldn't believe the language. And of course that moves all the way up. Another picture there of a whole school that starts every single day with mindful breathing. Right there, they're learning about the hand model of the brain by Dan Siegel, and understanding that. Kids lead that session now. And then understanding the emotional impact that we can have, that we can move ourselves into more positive states by working with these skills. And then the teachers who are learning that along the way. What we've found is not only is this an entry point for our students and a pathway, but our educators are learning these skills as well. And I know Kim will talk a little bit more about that. You can move to the next slide. And then thanks Kim, and then what has been compelling, I think, for all of us in BC as we explore SEL, but certainly for us in Coquitlam with this pathway in MindUP, is that from the brain, from working with adolescents and the brain, that's growing. We are certainly so fascinated and interested at middle school around what that looks like and how that can be built in our students. We are certainly looking at our curriculum. You know, our BC curriculum is so conducive to this work now with critical thinking and social responsibility, personal awareness, the PHE curriculum that encompasses well-being competencies or wants to develop those. And so there's lots of different ways we're seeing this idea of mindfulness and perspective taking and optimism growing in our classrooms and in our curriculum. And then finally, you know, in this time, what I've been so pleased to see in Coquitlam, and I know this is happening in other districts, the next slide, is during this time, and this is my friend and colleague, Jen Nichols, who hosts a mindful breathing in her school every single day and actually has kids running it, but this is her online, and the kids come on every week. And they, as many of our schools do now, and many of our schools in all of our districts, have this sort of framework, this container that we're holding these conversations in, where we have that daily check-in, whether it's a mindful breathing setting, and that we're making sure we make room for this idea of giving it to others and kindness, and what does that look like? And then finally, that optimistic closure. How do we end with that reframing and setting in a gratitude intention, noticing those wonderful things around us to enhance and nurture well-being in each other, ourselves, and our children. So MindUP started very, very much a program and a set of lessons for me, and it continues to do that with so many of our educators, but it actually is a doorway, it has been a doorway for us into so much more. And I'll turn it over to Kim to talk about that a little bit more.
Thank you, Marna. That was excellent and a great segue. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to bring you on a journey of our research on the effectiveness of the MindUP program. As Molly mentioned, I was actually got a phone call or an email, I forget what it was, from Goldie Hawn, one of her assistants, saying, come meet with me to talk about this, because I believe I believe in this program, but I want the science part of it, and I want research on it right from the very start. And that really brought me in, and having had expertise in evaluating SEL programs. I had evaluated the Roots of Empathy program, some of you might be familiar with. When I was brought into this program, as I do as a scientist, I am skeptical. I need to see the evidence. I need to see, is it really an effective program? So that's what I'm going to take you on this journey. So before you do I just have to take you on a bit of a scientific journey here. Before you do any research study, you always have to have a logic model. You have to say, what are the components of the program? What would they lead to? And what kinds of both short-term and long-term outcomes you'd want to see? So for example, mindful attention awareness practices should theoretically and empirically, what we find in research, improved attention, and that should lead to improved social and emotional competence and school success and student behavior. Practicing gratitude or savoring happy experiences, acts of kindness should lead to positive emotions, increased well-being, and so on. So you see here, this really put our pathway of what were the core components of MindUP, outcomes did we expect to see, both long-term and short-term. So I'm gonna, before we get to the epigenetics, and I know you're all waiting, I'm just gonna just give you a hand wave to some of the research. So we really began the research in about 2007, 2008, and published this study that was a quasi-experimental study, so of 12 classrooms assigned to 6 to MindUP, 6 to comparison, not get MindUP. And we looked at both before and after and found improved optimism and improved teacher-rated students' attention, social emotional competence, aggression, and oppositional defiant. They improved, decreased in those. Our next study, which was done in, I have to say, Coquitlam, and was really a pioneering study. It was one of the first SEL program to actually include the collection of children's cortisol through saliva. So to look at stress physiology. So in this study, we randomized 4th and 5th graders in 4 classrooms. In both before and after, we looked at executive functions, cortisol, and a number of self-report measures, as well as academic achievement. And as you can see here, we found improved attention through these computerized tasks, improved stress physiology. Students who had the MindUP program actually had a healthier stress, diurnal stress pattern than those not in that didn't have MindUP, as well as a number of empathy, decrease in depressive symptoms, improved in peer-nominated kindness, peer pro-socialness, and peer acceptance, and also had higher end-of-the-year math grades. So that was, again, a really important study. And then others have done research on MindUP. Here's one by Thierry et al. That looked at pre-kindergarten and kindergarten children. They as well looked at before and after and found improved executive functions, teacher-reported attention in children, and also improved vocabulary and reading scores for children who received MindUP. In Portugal, another study, so I just want to show you there's been a number of studies, again, another quasi-experimental study with 4th grade students and 20 teachers. They did a longer whole course on MindUP and social emotional learning that the teachers went through. But again, they found that the MindUP children increased in regulation of emotions, positive emotions or affect, self-compassion, and also this led to also an improvement in the teachers teaching MindUP own well-being, which is a whole other factor on there as well. And then, and just hot off the press last week, we got our paper just got published, and this is with Kyle Mitsuba, who's at Kwantlen Polytechnic University, led a study looking at MindUP in northern Uganda, in post-Uganda. Is that so cool? And so we did this study. I mean, I could even tell you more about how they did the study, because what do you do when there's no electricity? So anyway, so there was, so those were the studies that And it tells you there about the different findings. And then just to highlight, we have a chapter that was published in a handbook of mindfulness and education that Rob Roser and I co-edited. Jackie Maloney was the lead author on it and talked about a summary of the research studies. But what I loved, Jackie's master's thesis was looking at a qualitative evaluation of what do students say about MindUP? And when asked what did they like about MindUP, one student said it calms and helps you be conscious of what you're doing. You can learn about yourself while doing it. A grade 7 girl, when we asked them what they liked best about the MindUP program, for the greatest one was this mindfulness practices. They really enjoyed having the mindfulness practices, as long as another increased well-being. And then when they said they would found out that a great majority of them would recommend it to a friend. And said it would help them be if they're stressed and mindful. And then we found actually that over 50% of the kids taught MindUP to another person, mostly their parents or their siblings, which was really fascinating. And they said their reasons for recommending it is because it increases well-being. And I wanted to just give you this taste of it, because what basically we find is if you think about right now during the pandemic, this focus on well-being, it would be so fascinating to find out how many students are using mindfulness practices that they've learned through the brain breaks during this time. I'm just so curious. So I'm going to just take you along this study that we started out a couple of years ago. Mike Kobor, one of my collaborators, is a social expert in social epigenetics. Nicole Gladish, also doing her PhD right now in epigenetics, and then Jenna Whitehead, who's actually on this call as well, or the Zoom presentation, and then Jenny Kittle and Molly, part of the study. So essentially what's happened, and I'll tell you a bit more about epigenetics, but what we're finding is social epigenetics means that we can change our DNA. So yes, we're born with DNA and this gene sequence, but our environment actually can change how our DNA is methylated, how it responds. And so there's been several studies with adults showing that you can change DNA through mindfulness. Here's one with a study that showed changes in DNA methylation through yoga. Here's one that showed changes through looking at expert meditators, had a change on DNA. And then there's a larger whole focus, this epigenetics, showing that that if you want to look at resilience, find out how you can make what kinds of approaches you can have to change your DNA. And here's another one recently that's about this idea that mindfulness is linked to changes in DNA. So the question arose for me. I was working with Mike Kobor at the Human Early Learning Partnership, Social Epigenetics. I said, has anyone ever looked at DNA, change, social epigenetics or epigenetic change for students getting a mindfulness program? And we looked and looked, couldn't find anybody. So no one had tried it. I said, let's go for it. And that was really, really important. But let me just tell you a bit. This is from Nicole Gladish, who's one of the members of our team. Just give you a little primer on epigenetics. So basically, epigenetics is basically, we have DNA and we have heritable alterations. So persistent epigenetics is persistent and heritable alterations in genomic information that do not involve changes in the DNA sequence. So if you think about it, we have experiences, biological pathways, gene expression. So the whole idea of social epigenetics is how experience gets under the skin and changes. So our social environment influences the way our DNA is methylated. And it goes back and forth both ways. So if you think of DNA methylation, is that your DNA sequence is like the methylation is like a dimmer switch. So you could, depending on your social experiences, it could either turn it on, turn it off, turn it down. So that is how our DNA is affected on various levels. And it can happen in our brain cells and our blood cells of where DNA resides. And just to show you an example that actually started. So here are I believe they're rats, and how maternal diet changes the DNA methylation, or results in epigenetic change just in terms of maternal one. So here you have the DNA methylation, you're turning it, changing it down, and that's just based on maternal diet for those rats. And here are two rats who are 100% have the same DNA, and this is how the environment changed that. DNA also, this is from Time Magazine. Again, this idea that these rats have 100% identical DNA, but they were exposed to different environments as well. So the whole idea of how genes interact. So we first conducted a feasibility study, and I have to say a big kudos to Coquitlam, and really it is through this partnership with SEL BC that we're able to even do this kind of pioneering research that most people wouldn't even conceive of doing, going into public schools and collecting DNA from children. Yes, that's what we did. So we did a pilot study in 4 classrooms in a middle school. The purpose was to evaluate social and emotional learning program for middle school students that focus on social emotional skills, MindUP. You all know about that now. We decided to focus on middle school students in particular because that is a time of heightened change in the both neuroplasticity. It's a time of a stress pileup as well in terms of all the changes that occur, but it's a window of opportunity. So we thought, let's take that time period, 6th and 7th graders, that's really very malleable. So maybe if we try and change something, it'll have long-lasting effects and help be a protective factor as they move into adolescence. So this research method, this first feasibility study, and really this study was just to see, like, could we pull this off? Would kids do, would the school district say yes? Would trustees say yes? Would the principal say yes? Would teachers say yes? Would kids say yes? Would parents say yes? Would they all be into it? And yes, so first just check, that all happened. We were able to conduct this study with 95 6th and 7th grade students. That just gives you some information about them there. We used a number of different measures, very rigorous scientific design, randomly assigning, by basically a coin flip of who gets the MindUP program, who stays as a control group, pre-test and post-test. We collected DNA through saliva, just so you know, you basically collect a huge vial of saliva. We also looked at cortisol again to look at diurnal cortisol through saliva again, and then a number of self-report measures and teacher report measures. One thing that was so neat about it, that we, and Jenna, you're really, a shout out to Jenna, who really is the architect behind this, is creating science lessons. So the way to get kids excited and teachers, we said we're going to come in and do science lessons about epigenetics and about cortisol, about stress in the body. So we created a series of lesson plans on science, and also connected it all to the BC curriculum and the physical health and education outcomes as well. So you're going to do a DNA trivia, see how much you know about DNA. How many cells do you think make up your entire body? 37.2 trillion. What parts of your body do you think genes are the recipe for? Every part, everything. And this is, the kids really love this, doing this. If you took all of the DNA from one cell in your body and spread it out in a single line, how long do you think it might be? The length of a regulation basketball hoop. And can you guess how many genes you have? Yes, 20,000 genes. And it could stretch back and forth to the sun. And okay, what percentage of genes are similar to a worm? 70%. What about a zebrafish? 71. How much to your cat? 90%. And what about chimpanzees?
90% of the same genes as your cat.
Yes.
Wow.
So 98%. And then what percentage of our genes are similar between each other? 99.9%.
Wow.
So we also did slides on biology of happiness. And I'm not going to go through all of this, just give it time, but just the idea of positive and negative effects of stress. We asked kids to talk about stress in their body. Then we went them through just telling what happens when you're stressed, is fight or flight, and kind of what happens, how cortisol occurs. And then, of course, the saber-toothed tiger chasing you and how you're reacting. And then just given this is the lunch hour, we also, to get kids, because they had to give us a lot of spit, Let me just tell you. And so we, Jenna did this amazing activity where when they were providing us with their saliva, they actually saw this slideshow while they're doing it. And I just thought I would make you hungry right now while you're having your, well, you're probably, hopefully you're eating your lunch. And then I just like this one. So I'm just going to quickly lead you through our results. So we just had some preliminary results from this feasibility study. We saw compared to the control group or comparison group, students in MindUP increased in empathy and perspective taking. They increased in positive mood, decreased in negative emotions and anxiety as well, significantly. They also, MindUP students increased significantly in emotional control and also in pro-social academic, their thoughts about pro-social and the idea of altruism, and also decreased in decreased a little bit in intrinsic pro-social motivation. I won't go into that. But according to teachers, they also improved in social emotional competence and attention as well. Now, what about the methylation? Well, what happened? So you're going to have to just look at this one line. Going to show. So this is and this is the analysis of the methylation. Basically, it is a analysis that looks at how many, what percentage of your DNA methylation of your whole genome is affected. So you'll see where this red line is now. This is the MindUP program that shows basically this is pre-test that there were no differences between, this is just the MindUP program, all students involved, showing there were no baseline differences between any of the students. And then here is the post-test that basically says, I mean, this is, you know, I'm not a social epigeneticist, but basically it says after the program, there were differences between those students who had the MindUP program and those who did not in terms of their DNA methylation on 2 sites. So this was big news. Of course, then they looked at what sites were they associated with and did a whole analysis on that and found that it was actually sites that had to do with how your stress immune system, how you respond to those things. And there's more analysis happening. This is one gene that was showing the difference between MindUP and kids. So it's very preliminary, but really showing some promising findings, showing that you can actually, with this MindUP, program, show that there is changes in DNA methylation and hence epigenetic change. And right now we did another study where the larger population of students, 14 classrooms, again in Coquitlam, and we did a much larger study with all the same measures, also executive function tests as well. And we had 14 classrooms and we collected all the data. The teachers got trained in MindUP. We're implementing starting in February, and you can guess what happened. Yes, we had to curtail the research study and our hope to get it going next year. So I'm just looking at the time. I think we have some time for questions, and I'm excited to hear what kind of questions people have. Thank you. I'll stop my screen share so I can see people.
Okay.
Go ahead, Connie.
Yeah, Kim, I've been tracking a few of the questions, and there are some questions around the MindUP program and if there is a version that has been created for secondary students and also one for post-secondary students.
I'll let Molly take it away.
I'll take that one. Yeah, that's a great question and one we get frequently. And currently, no, not specifically is there a dedicated program for high school, although there have been several educators in schools that have taken the existing curriculum and used it in high school. It's on the to-do list, and I think there would be a wonderful fit with post-secondary as well. I think the key thing is that these are the things that we teach in MindUP are kind of all ages, so they're important for all of us. And I know moving forward, we're going to have more focus also on the educator and bringing the practices specifically for the educator as well. So thank you for the question.
I would just give a big shout out to Zoom Vo, an adolescent pediatrician at Children's Hospital who wrote a book, Mindfulness for Teens. and has a website with some practices. So Zoom has a program, and so if you're looking for something for secondary, go to his website. He's got some really good practices that you could just push and play.
There's an app called Breather that he put together with in collaboration with adolescents that might be of interest.
So another question that's come up is access to the resources, including the science lessons that we saw. Would those be available?
Yeah, Jenna, where are you? Where are you, Jenna? There you are. There's Jenna. Jenna's the architect of all those amazing science lessons. Can I just say thank you, Jenna? I mean, Jenna, I think it'd be fine to share them. What should we do for?
Yeah, happy to share them. They're not all mine. There's like a history of creation before me too. But yeah, we did share it with all the teachers who were part of our studies. We always do share them with the teachers who are in our studies. But if there's an easy way to do that, I'm happy to pop it up.
Figure out if there's maybe someone can email me. I'm easy to find, and then I can connect you with Jenna and just set up.
We can put it perhaps in a folder for this particular retreat on our SEL BC website.
That great.
And along with some of the studies, because there are questions too. Just has that study that you just talked about been published? There's quite a bit around questions around things like male participants. So somebody said, you know, in terms of gender differences, or research that sort of takes a look at male participants. She likened it to adult programs where there's a low level of participation. And so is there a bias that's apparent in children and youth with that?
Oh, it's interesting. So I'll say, first of all, the studies, certainly, again, we can put up those studies. So the genetic study has not yet been published. It's been presented at conferences, academic conferences, and writing that up. Right now, Nicole Gladish, the PhD student, is taking the lead on that.
I'm okay. I'm good.
And then it's important to have, and then I think, what was the other question? Oh, the male, female, that's an interesting, we've never found gender differences in our research in terms of who benefits more or less from it. And interestingly, also in how much they like, because remember, this is a study. I mean, what's so interesting about this is that the other studies with the adult populations are people who sign up to be in a meditation retreat or sign up for yoga. These kids don't, they're in a classroom. I mean, they could say they don't want to do it, of course, but we haven't found any differences in terms of that. Jenna, have you found any differences in boys and girls and their willingness to participate in the studies?
No, it's almost exactly 50-50 split. There's a pretty even participation rate for both genders. Yeah.
And another question around self-regulation. So does the MindUP program curriculum highlight co-regulation as a way of supporting children's regulation?
That's a great question. So I would say originally not explicitly. However, that's recognized in our training and certainly has been woven in more to the early years curriculum. And just certainly the awareness around the development, brain development, and understanding, you know, the ability for children to actually self-regulate on their own is tied to development. So we wouldn't expect, you know, a very young child to just go off and do your breathing by yourself. So I think we really take a developmental approach, and in the training we address those things. Good question.
And another question around looking at educators' presence as an impact for students. Oh, Kim, you're muted.
No, I was hearing the jackhammer. We haven't, you know, so there's two things. One is we have a study that we did a feasibility study looking at a program called Smart in Education and MindUP. And so Smart in Education is a program for teachers. And so we looked at kids who received a program where the teacher first had the program for themselves and then MindUP versus MindUP only, and found significant differences on some factors, not all, but certainly found some benefits and for many things, there was a value added if the teacher first went through his a program for themselves and then did MindUP versus just going into MindUP. And what we haven't done is to see from before and after if teachers who implement MindUP actually change in their well-being. But the Portugal study did find that teachers increased in well-being.
And I was just going to say my dissertation is looking a little bit at mindfulness in teachers, and not to do with MindUP, but just a bit of presence and teachers' attention. And so the lab is looking at that now. So yeah, in the future, maybe.
Yes, I think it's a great future direction. Any other questions?
There are lots more, but I'm going to turn it back to Gail. There is one about including telomerase in the epigenetics study. But Kim, I also am very aware that you have to go. So I'm going to turn it to Gail.
So I'm going to sign off now because I have to go to a health faculty meeting to chair. So I'm so sorry. I'm so grateful for being able to be with all of you today to share some of this work and hopefully be able to look at the can we save the questions? That would be so great if we could see them. It's so great for us. But again, big shout out to SEL BC for coordinating and organizing this. I feel so honored and humbled to be with all of you. It's only through you and your enthusiasm for research that has allowed us to be able to do this research that has made a difference for children. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Kim. Yeah, and I know Kim has to run off. I won't put up my last little slide because I know people are leaving and need to go. Just so thanks, grateful to you all for coming and to our presenters for presenting today. We are hopefully next week having another one of these on next Thursday at the same time. And we'll get that up on our website for you to have a look at. It's with Dr. Brenda Morrison. It's on restorative practice. So I hope you'll check that out as well. And then the last thing is just, if you would please fill out the feedback form that will be coming to you right after this webinar. We'd really, really appreciate your input, and we'll try and save all the questions and get back to you with some of those things. And thank you so much for coming.